Hey, good morning. This is Richard Hsu, host of Hsu Untied. This morning, I'm really thrilled and honored to have with me as my guest Ramsey Homsany, who's the co-founder and president of Octant. Ramsey, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much. I'm a fan, Richard. Nice to be here.
Thank you. So, Ramsey, I'm very interested today in talking to you about how you transitioned from being a lawyer to a co-founder of your own company, but maybe just talk a little bit about your legal career. I know you've had some very lofty GC positions at a couple of well-known companies. Maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I've had lots of sort of gut transitions in my career. Actually, I studied engineering undergrad, so it was sort of a strange thing for me to go to law school. My parents are immigrants, and no one in my family had ever been a lawyer. My grandmother in Egypt cried when she found out I was going to law school. In Egypt, people who went to law school go on to become government bureaucrats, and the heroes are engineers. And here I was, an engineer, throwing it all away and going to law school. But I actually had a wonderful time in law school, and then really missed technology. So I came out to Silicon Valley to be a technology lawyer, which is what I did for many years. And one of my, I was more focused on the biology side as a lawyer, but just became enamored early on by Google. Got a really lucky break to get a job there, and had an amazing time. And it really sort of reoriented my perspective around what was possible in society. Quite frankly, I was, as I said, the son of immigrants, and so I was always taught to sort of keep my head down, perform well, don't make noise, don't be seen. And here I was going to work for this company that just was trying to break all the rules. It was so liberating for me. It was just extremely exciting. So I had an amazing time there, sort of taking the skills I had learned at my law firm and applying them to the business. I worked primarily on commercial and technology licensing law there, and I led teams in business development negotiations and writing terms of service and doing a lot of stuff that Google was breaking a lot of ground in. I sort of led the legal charge into the advertising business, which strangely enough, when I was at Google, none of the lawyers wanted to work on. They thought that was not cool. They all wanted to work on sort of the deep tech. And so I got this break, and I moved to New York, and I fought Madison Avenue for a while. And then was fortunate to meet the founders at Dropbox and build the legal team and a bunch of different functions there as well. So I was at Dropbox for about 5 years, and got more of a general education and training there on sort of building technology companies, which was an amazing experience. So I got to take on additional functions, helped run government affairs, or ran government affairs. For a while, I ran the human resources and the comms departments as well. Sort of was just a generalized member of the management team. That was a great experience.
But somehow that didn't fulfill everything you wanted to do. Was there? The buildup I'm getting is that well, that was a fantastic job, and for a lot of people, it'd be like the pinnacle. But somehow I'm feeling like there's still an itch that needed to be scratched.
Yeah, that it was a pinnacle. Google was a pinnacle. I'd say in some ways, the most fun I ever had in my career in some ways was those early years at Google, when we were the underdogs and I was just another guy in the legal department. And it just felt like we were all in it together, that sense of team and camaraderie. But I think somewhere along the way, I adopted this mindset that there are just too many interesting things to do. There are way more interesting things to do than any of us will be able to do in our lifetimes. And so I'm just always looking to do something that's going to stretch me. And I felt like some combination of being an in-house lawyer and working in sort of what was quickly becoming the SaaS sort of industry. It no longer felt to me like I was on a pirate ship anymore. It felt like I was in the Navy. And I just wanted to go do something different, both in industry-wise, but also in terms of trying on a new role. And that's sort of what led me to synthetic biology and drug discovery.
Well, how did you pick that? I mean, I'm sure you didn't just sit down one morning and say, I'm going to just start this company. Like, tell me the process on how even figured out what kind of company to start.
Yeah, like all my other career decisions, it was wildly naive. You know, um, I had gotten to a point in my life that, speaking to my 20-year-old self, I never dreamed it was possible, in the sense that I would have control, that I could economically take risks in my life, and do what I wanted to do. And so I started thinking about, what would 20-year-old Ramsey want to do with his life if you told 20-year-old Ramsey that you don't have to worry about paying a mortgage, you don't have to worry about, like getting notches on your resume. And I started, one of the observations I made was that most of the technology development in society sort of occurs on this, at least in the private sector, occurs on this sort of 3 to 4 year time frame of success. So like I was getting courted by a lot of companies to go be their general counsel or be their chief administrative officer, and it was always sort of like, we're going to IPO in 2 years, we're going to this in 3 years. The question I was asking is like, what about the really hard stuff that takes 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years to do? Developing a drug takes 10 years. What was going to happen in nuclear energy? What was going to happen in these other, in space? And so I spent a bunch of time looking at technology areas where I thought I had the ability to take uncommon risks that most people wouldn't take in their careers, something that I won't know if it's going to work for 4 or 5 years. And then even then, there isn't going to be an outcome for another 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
So I narrowed it down to some of the areas I was really focused on at the time. This was sort of 2017, were AI, nuclear energy, what was happening in biology. And when I started spending time and learning about what had happened in biology since I had left, I was just floored, blown away. That was the area that sort of just like drew my attention more than the others.
How did you get drawn? Tell me about the company that you ended up founding, and how did you get drawn into it? Was it a paper you saw, or somebody you knew was doing something? Like, how did this idea even get to you?
Yeah, it was a few articles actually in the popular press about what was happening both in 2 technology areas. One was CRISPR and one was gene drives. And this notion that people were treating cells like computer programs. You could edit their DNA, you could read their DNA, you could write their DNA. That was mind-blowing to me. It was like everything around us on this planet was all of a sudden becoming programmable. I don't think the human mind could even understand what that was going to mean for society. And it reminded me of some of those early moments I'd had when I was excited about Google. Like, oh my God, imagine the whole world's information being accessible and searchable. That will just change the world in ways we can't even imagine. I was very lucky in that I had known the person who's now my co-founder through family, and I just started calling him, almost harassing him, like, tell me about this, tell me about that. Who should I, who are the professors at Stanford I should go talk to? What? And just became voracious about learning more about what's happening in that field, and became convinced that not only would the technology dramatically affect society, but also that the way companies were being built in that space was going to have to change to keep up with how the technology was changing. Biology used to be this science where you would do experiments months at a time, and that has a very real consequence for how you build the companies, how you staff the teams. And all of a sudden, people were sort of editing living organisms, running experiments more. It wasn't quite like software is on week scales. Software is on days or hour scales. But weeks compared to months is pretty drastically different. So I would talk to my now co-founder about, like, how should biology companies be built different now that the sort of innovation cycles in these technologies have fundamentally shifted.
So what is the mission of Octant, and what are you trying to do?
Yeah, I mean, at its most basic level, I would describe us as a next generation drug discovery company. So we're using a lot of the latest tools in synthetic biology, high throughput chemistry to usher in a new way of discovering drugs. And so we have these very sort of cutting edge ways of understanding what's happening in cellular mechanisms. So sort of, if you think about a human cell and we're composed of trillions of them. Just a single human cell is just astonishingly complex. It's it's like, imagine the complexity of all of New York City in just like one little cell. And our ability to understand what's happening in cells is still extremely primitive. And so we use a lot of these tools to sort of track what's happening in cells and use that information to build better drugs.
Now, is biology the science you studied as an undergrad or not?
I did study biochemical engineering.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
okay.
I had some, I had like the basic courses down, but really the stuff I studied was like the Stone Ages compared to what's actually happening.
Well, it's interesting that your legal career didn't go in that direction. Like you didn't become the GC of a pharma company or a biotech startup. You ended up going into IT. Was that a deliberate move, or did that just, just presented itself?
Most of my work at Wilson Sonsini was on the bio side. I was doing a bunch of medical device and biotech work. It wasn't a conscious industry decision. It was just that when I started reading about what Google was doing, I just became enamored with it. And I was still early enough in my career that I just had a lot of flexibility. I hadn't been typecast yet as this kind of lawyer or that kind of lawyer. And so at the time, Google was just looking for smart people with any kind of technical background. The company really valued in their non-engineering ranks people who sort of got along and thought well with engineers. And so luckily enough, sort of I was predisposed to that.
What made you pick this over? You mentioned a couple of things you looked at, AI, that probably, you probably could have done something in Bitcoin. I mean, you were obviously deeply steeped in the tech world. I mean, why did you pick this over, say, AI, which is obviously also very big and potentially life-changing, world-changing?
Yeah, I still think AI is very exciting, and we do some of that here, quite frankly. So I get a little bit of that here as well. But fundamentally, I just thought, and this is just a personal choice, that we have this alien technology all around us that's way more sophisticated than AI or anything that we can create ourselves. We all are a product of that technology. AI itself is a product of that technology through our own brains, right? And it just seemed way more exciting to me in terms of what was going to be possible. Like, imagine a little cell that can be programmed to either be a tree or be a human or be, what was going to be possible if we as humans could slowly start to crack some of those codes and manipulate them seemed wildly exciting to me.
Well, what's it like being in a non-lawyer role? Tell me a little about that. I mean, is it feel totally different? Do you end up, reverting, always trying to be the lawyer? Do people think of you as only the lawyer? Obviously, you're doing a lot as president. You're, running a company. You start, tell me a little bit what that transition has been like from a job perspective.
Yeah, it's a lot of personal reflection and growth to be good at it. I think in some ways it's a parallel journey to sort of going from being a firm lawyer to being a company lawyer, right? Where you have to really get out of your old mindset and use the tools and skills that you honed in your last role, but not be trapped by them. And so I try very hard here not to be the lawyer, even though I'm often, dealing with some of our outside lawyers. I have more legal experience than.
Of course.
I try really hard to let them be the lawyer and for me to be the client. And I think I'm a deep believer in sort of the adversarial system in lots of ways. And one of them is that I think you arrive at good legal decisions by letting the lawyers be the lawyers and letting the clients be the clients and having that tension. And so it's important to me to not try to play the wrong hat in the wrong moment, for lack of a better analogy. And actually, we have a few former lawyers here at the company too. I think, one of the things I love about your podcast is you interview all sorts of amazing people, many of whom are still lawyers, or I guess we're all still lawyers, but practicing lawyers, and many of whom are not. And there's something about technology that really benefits from how you're taught to think in law school. This notion of sort of working with abstract ideas like intellectual property and technology strategy. I think a lot of lawyers can be really good at that, but you have to leave some aspects of your legal hat behind. Otherwise, you just sort of like muck up the works.
Yeah. Are you finding it to be fun? I mean, are you having fun doing it, or is it scary, or both, or what is your, how is
Oh
it
man,
like?
I mean, the rooms you see behind me, there's people editing life forms. I mean, it's like I show up to work every day and I'm just blown away by it. And I think one of my favorite things at the company, hopefully others enjoy it as much as I do, is I get to call on people who are at the very tops of their fields and say, hey, let's go for a walk. I really need you to explain to me how like protein misfolding affects protein trafficking in the cell, right? Like I get my own personal tutor to walk me through these things that I find endlessly fascinating, and not just as a pure scientific concept, but there's hundreds of diseases that are caused by that mechanism. The notion that I get to learn about those mechanisms and try to build a company around trying to solve some of those diseases, really, for me, it's the right combination of just being passionate about the subject matter and also feeling like I'm really doing something important.
Is this something that you kind of was always in the back of your mind all the years you were acting as a lawyer? Like, did you always think like, oh, one of these days I want to start a company or somehow, or be an entrepreneur? Or did this something that just really came to you after you, kind of been a lawyer for a couple of decades?
I'm just not a planner. I don't, I do remember when I was in my late 30s saying to myself, hey, you know what? Around when you turn 40, you should just do something very different with your life. Like life is short. I was really inspired in law school by a few of my classmates who are sort of on their second profession. I had some classmates who were former doctors and they were in their late 30s, early 40s. Some I think one had been like a professor of philosophy, and now they wanted to do something. Actually, my roommate, I think it was my second year in law school, had been a Catholic priest for many years. And I found that so inspiring, this notion that we get to reinvent ourselves if we want to. And so I wouldn't say that 20 years ago was like, one day I want to find a company or start a company. But I do think that for me, the ultimate luxury in my life, other than sort of the people I care about and having a great family, has been that I actually have the flexibility to do what I want with my life. Like very few people on this planet wake up and get to go work at a place they want to go work at. Right? They show up to factories, they show up to hazardous jobs. They're scrapping every day to put food on the table for their families. And so to me, that's the ultimate privilege. And I in a sense, if you had asked me my goals in life when I was 20, it would have been to have some agency over that. And I do. And I just want to make sure I keep that promise to my 20-year-old self of actually doing something great with it and not just sort of continuing to serially climb a ladder, which I think is great if that's what you want to do. But I think a lot of people in their careers sort of get trapped in sort of wanting to do the next incremental thing.
Yeah, for sure.
And I don't say that with judgment. I think for a lot of people that can be very fulfilling too. I just know for me, it wasn't what I wanted to do that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Ramsey, it's been a fascinating story, and I really appreciate your taking the time to share it with me. As you know, I've interviewed a lot of lawyers and former lawyers, but it's still pretty rare for them to go and start their own company, particularly one as exciting as this. So I really appreciate your telling me all about it.
Well, the water's warm over here, so all the people out there are thinking about it. Give it a try. It's an amazing experience. We need more people out there doing, building things for our future. So it's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thanks so much. This is Richard Hsu and Ramsey Homsany. Thanks.
Thank you.